There is a story that has stayed with me for years. When the poet James Dickey was a young man, he came across a line by the now almost forgotten poet Trumbull Stickney. And all his island shivered into flowers. Years later, Dickey said that his entire existence as a poet began with that one word. That is the revelation. Not a big idea, not a plot, not a moral lesson, one verb. Not became, not turned into, shivered. That single word showed him what language could do. How can one word change a life? Poets understand something the rest of us often forget. They understand language, not grammar, not vocabulary, language itself, the mysterious substance out of which we build memory, meaning, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. We live inside language. Most of us hardly notice it. Language is invisible until someone uses it extraordinarily well. And that may be one of the deepest questions poetry asks. What kind of attention makes a human life richer? Most of us use words the way we use forks. Ordinary tools we reach for without wonder. To order lunch, answer emails, apologize, argue, explain, and get through the day. But poets are different. They don't stand outside the world explaining it to us. They stand inside language, listening for what the rest of us miss. Poets slow down enough to feel their weight, their rhythm, their history, their texture. They understand that changing a word can change a thought, and changing a thought can change a life. That is why poetry can feel so small and so immense at the same time. A poem can fit on a single page. It has no orchestra, no marble, no camera, no actors, no special effects, just words. And yet, somehow, a great poem can haunt us for the rest of our lives. A great poem does not merely describe experience, it returns experience to us more vividly than before. It gives us back the world with the surface removed. James Dickey once said that he wanted a poetry that illuminated his experience, that restored something to him, that brought him closer to the world. That may be what art does at its best, not remove us from the world, but bring us closer to it. This is what the greatest poets do. They linger where the rest of us hurry past. James Wright could look at two horses in a pasture and somehow write about loneliness, tenderness, and the terrible beauty of being alive. We step over the barbed wire into the pasture, where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She is black and wide. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly, I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. Nothing dramatic happens. No battle, no romance, no plot twist. Just a man stepping into a pasture to meet two horses. And yet, by the end, we are no longer where we began. That is what poetry can do. William Stafford could begin with something as ordinary and awful as finding a dead deer on a mountain road. By glow of the taillight, I stumbled back of the car and stood by the heap. A doe, a recent killing. She had stiffened already, almost cold. I dragged her off. She was large in the belly. My fingers touching her side brought me the reason. Her side was warm. Her fawn lay there waiting, alive, still, never to be born. Beside that mountain road, I hesitated. The car aimed ahead its lowered parking lights. Under the hood purred the steady engine. I stood in the glare of the warm exhaust turning red. Around our group, I could hear the wilderness listen. I thought hard for us all, my only swerving, then pushed her over the edge into the river. Stafford does not tell us what to think. He places us beside him on a dark road where there's no clean answer, no hero, no villain, just one impossible decision. The poem doesn't give us certainty. It gives us conscience. William Butler Yeats could imagine someone at the end of life, looking back across the years and turn love into memory, time, and regret. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true, but one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. Wright gives us tenderness. Stafford gives us conscience. Yeats gives us time. This is what poetry does. It enlarges consciousness. Perhaps that is what poetry really is, attention distilled to its purest form. Theodore Roethke put it even more simply. Poetry is language at its most memorable. Which brings me back to Trumbull Stickney. And all his island shivered into flowers. Why not bloomed? Why not opened? Why not became? Because shivered into flowers is live, bodily, strange, almost violent. The island does not merely change, it trembles into beauty. One unexpected verb, one young reader, a life changed. James Dickey carried that word with him for the rest of his life. We live in a culture that measures importance by money, by followers, by stadiums, by bestseller lists. Poetry rarely wins those contests. Most poets never become famous. Many poems are read by only a small number of people. Yet some of the greatest minds our civilization has produced spent their lives trying to perfect a few lines that most people will never read. There is something noble about that. The belief that the right word, the right rhythm, the right image might awaken another human being. On James Dickey's gravestone, or carve the words, "I move at the heart of the world." Poets stand inside language. They spend their lives listening more carefully than most of us ever do. They remind us that words are not just labels. They are the shape of thought itself. That is what the poets preserve, not information, not decoration, a way of being more awake. And if we are lucky, every now and then, a poem finds the right word, the right rhythm, the right image. And something in us shivers too.